Hello, everybody. This is Melissa Tate, and I am here today with my friend Lisa.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, so we are both Black conservatives, and we went on a show yesterday. It was a panel to discuss critical race theory, and we were the only conservatives on the panel. And it was well moderated. The only thing was that the format was more of like having a large group of people speaking. So we had about 9 panelists on there. So it was really hard to kind of have a conversation and a constructive debate. So I don't think the format was good, but I do think that the moderator did a really good job. I just think that we didn't really get a chance to put in some of the points we wanted to put in, because by the time it came down to us, a lot of points had been made, and we weren't able to use the little time that we had to push back on some of the things they said. So we decided to make a video that will kind of give us an opportunity to push back on some of the points that were being made on that panel. So we're gonna, Lisa and I are gonna be discussing this, and we're gonna be talking about what they said and what our response is as far as critical race theory goes.
And critical race theory, that's the topic du jour. So we really want to have an opportunity to dig in and look at it point by point, and then be able to really extrapolate and give a good explanation as to why we disagree with critical race theory.
So one of the things that one of the first questions was the origins of critical race theory, and already there was a disagreement with that, because the girl that answered, well, some of the people that answered, they kind of tied it to the 70s and the civil rights movement, and that's not true. The history of it goes further back, and it actually didn't come from the United States. So I'll let Lisa kind of go into that, because she kind of knows a little more about the history of critical race theory.
Yeah, so on that topic, I immediately had to push back on the idea that critical race theory actually came out of the United States in the 1970s. To the contrary, everyone knows that critical race theory came from Karl Marx and Frederick Engels and the famous book, The Communist Manifesto. So critical race theory has its foundations in Marxism, Leninism, socialism, communism. And my immediate pushback, another reason for it, was that communism and socialism are the biggest failed experiments of the 20th century. 100 million deaths can be laid at the feet of what Karl Marx and Frederick Engels proposed as a utopian society. So we just encourage everyone to look it up for yourself. If you even look up the definition of critical theory, critical theory came from Karl Marx, and all they did was amend it and call it critical race theory. But if you look at the foundations of critical theory, you will immediately, within 30 seconds, know that this is the foundation for critical race theory. Failure.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, one of the panelists on there actually made my point, because she said that when she defined critical race theory, she said that it divides people into oppressed versus oppressor. And I thought that is classic Marxism. Because Marxism is designed to divide people based on oppressed versus oppressor. And Marxism mainly used like economics, but because the United States is mostly like economically sound, within the United States, they used race as the dividing factor. So you're dividing people between oppressed versus oppressor, which is classic Marxism.
Right. So everyone, do your research, look up critical theory, and then you'll just do a quick 30-second blurb of critical theory, and you're going to see this is the foundation for critical race theory.
Awesome. The next thing they talked about was, this is one of the things that I get a lot. So whenever I talk about, my book, I talk about critical race theory, the criticism that I get a lot is that I believe there is no such thing as racism. And that's a straw man, that they try to build against me, because I never said that racism doesn't exist. In fact, I talk about racism in all its forms in the book. I just don't dumb it down to it's just white versus black. So racism does exist, but the argument that we're making is that it's overcomable. And what do you think, Lisa?
Well, in general, I start out the gate that racism is a sin, just like all other sins. Racism is a belief system. It's a mindset. It's like jealousy.
Right.
And the last time I checked, there was never a sin that's ever been eradicated. So when I push back on critical race theory advocates, what I say is it your goal to eradicate racism? Because they, again, are setting up a straw man argument where they're creating a framework to do the impossible. It's going to be impossible. We're never going to eliminate poverty. We're never going to eliminate jealousy, and we're never going to eliminate racism. So what we have to do is try and give people tools where racism has little impact in their life. Not that you'll ever have a never have a negative experience, but it'll be minimal.
Yes.
And then we agree that in America, out of every country on the planet, we live in the most overcomable society that's ever existed. Yes. So if you have a problem in America, the tools exist for you to overcome that problem.
Absolutely. And I think one of the girls on there actually made a point, and she said she was an immigrant from Africa, like myself. She said, people from Africa are escaping white supremacy in Africa, which I found kind of interesting because I come from Africa and colonization ended a long time ago. So if anything, the problems that we have in Africa right now are due to the leadership that is there right now, and most of them are Black. But anyway, that's besides the point. The point that she was making is that she came to the United States for a better life. She left one white supremacy system in Africa for another white supremacy system here in the United States, and obviously one that she felt like has better opportunities for her. So I think she made the point for us that, okay, so let's just say that white supremacy exists. We will just agree with you for the sake of argument that white supremacy exists, but it's overcomable. And you as a person, as an immigrant who came here, was able to overcome. Sorry, there was another girl that was on the Zoom call, and she said that she had really become successful, and she lived in a white neighborhood, and she was able to achieve all these things, but she still believes that there's a white supremacist system. So okay, so let's just say white supremacy exists. Don't you think it is a better thing to teach our children how you were able to succeed despite the white supremacy? What were the things you did to become successful? Did you work hard? Did you go to college? Did you build a business? Isn't that a better thing to teach children rather than to teach them critical race theory that makes them look at themselves as an inferior person and makes this white supremacy system seem so insurmountable and seem like such an obstacle to success? So that's the point that we were trying to make. We're not trying to say that white supremacy, well, I don't personally believe that white supremacy as a system exists, but I will agree with you on that, with anyone on that, but I will still say that you can still overcome. So that is my point of view. It's like, why are we teaching children at a very young age that there's a system that is against them? I don't see any value in that. And I wasn't able to pick up any value from the discussion that we had in there that is really constructive in actually changing the lives of Black people.
Another fair question when we're talking about America being an inherently a white supremacist or racist country, then you have to ask people who are not born in the United States that when you decided to leave your country, you had an option of over 170 countries to choose from. Why did you choose to go to a country that is majority white? Why wouldn't you go to China? Why wouldn't you go to Japan? Mm-hmm. Why would you choose countries that are, as you frame it, inherently white supremacists? Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all. So anyway, so the other questions that we talked about, so it was also, I think some of them made an argument about the bigger white supremacy system that we're living that is global. So to me, that's Western civilization. So basically they're saying Western civilization is a white supremacist system, and it's colonizing and they can't even escape it. So one of the things I said to push back on this, but this was after the cameras were off, was that we're living in Western civilization right now. So this is a civilization that conquered another civilization that was there before it, and so forth. So it's not just white people or white supremacists that have conquered a civilization. There's the laws of conquest. Even in my own country, in Zimbabwe, the people that live in that region right now are not originally from there. I come from Zimbabwe, where most of the people there, they're known as the Bantu tribe. The Bantu tribe is known to have migrated from the East Africa down to that area, and they were conquering people that were over there. So there is a law of conquest that has always existed since the beginning of time. So this is not unique to America. So this idea that the Indians were conquered by the Americans and now America is like this evil country or whatever. Every single civilization has come and gone and been conquered by another. Whether you think that is a just thing or not, but that's just the way of the world. So it kind of goes into this idea that, that the left kind of puts out there is that, we should live in this utopian society where there is no injustice, there is no racism, and only then can we succeed. And I think that's completely wrong. So.
Yes, we can use a great example right from the Americas. We all learn in the history books that the Americas were conquered by the Mayans, the Incas, and the Aztecs. So there were great empires here before Europeans arrived.
Mm-hmm.
But no one ever discusses, well, the Mayans were the original culture, and we've seen that the Mayans have great temples all over Central and South America. Then they were taken over by the Incas. So does that mean that the descendants of the Incas owe the Mayans reparations? The Incas built great thousands and thousands of miles of roads. They were an infrastructure culture, but they were conquered by the Aztecs.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that the Aztecs owe the Incas reparations? And then the Aztecs most likely are the native tribes that are throughout the United States
Mm-hmm.
and Central and South America now. So those tribes also had warfare. So do those tribes owe each other reparations? So I one of the things that I challenge or I give pushback on is what I call is cherry picking. So why are you only picking European cultures and saying that they owe reparations? Do the Romans owe the Greeks reparations? Do the different tribes in Africa owe each other reparations?
Mm-hmm.
The Great Wall of China is actually the only human created object that can be seen from outer space, and they used lots of slave labor.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have to go back and pay all of those slaves reparations?
Mm-hmm.
So if they do, tell me why they do, and if they don't, tell me why they don't.
One of the other things that we wanted to discuss as far as pushing back on this ideology, because a lot of the people that were in this conversation, really were putting a lot of power within that white supremacy system. They were saying that, this is what we need to learn about. We need to learn about this white supremacy system. And I really couldn't figure out what is the value of it. Because for me, it's like you're yielding your power as an individual and as the entire Black community. You're going to yield it to white people and yield it to white supremacy. So I'm going to wait for white people to change. So you're not putting the ball in your court. So for my life to change, somebody else has to change. And to me, that is very counterproductive, because you can wait forever until the end of time and racism is never going to go away. So if that's what you're waiting for, that is not going to change. So to me, it's like giving white supremacists power, giving the KKK power, if that's what you truly believe the system is. And if you're going to let it stop you, that's what you're actually doing.
Well, what we see here when we're talking about critical race theory is we have to understand that there's underlying rules to everything that the left proposes. There are rules. And rule number 1 with critical race theory is that you are allowed to criticize the system, but you're not allowed to have a solution, and you're not allowed to advocate that you exit the system. Mm-hmm. And the biggest example that you and I always talk about is the schools. Mm-hmm. So the question for the whole debate was, should critical race theory be taught in schools? Mm-hmm. So you and I said no, critical race theory should not be taught in schools. Mm-hmm. And my reason for saying no is that critical race theory is a fake revolution. If they were revolutionary, you would be advocating that we leave the white supremacist system. Mm-hmm. But what they do is they say that this is a horrible system. It's based on racism. It's based on murder. It's based on theft. It's based on genocide. But we should try and work within the system to find a solution. That makes no sense. If someone is going to put your 5-year-old in a system where they're going to be taught racism, sexism, genocide, manipulation, and that the same people who are supposed to solve the problem are the people that benefit from keeping the problem in place. The same people who are supposed to solve the problem are the people that benefit from keeping the problem in place. Mm-hmm. Again, the foundation is you're allowed to criticize the system, but you're not allowed to advocate that we leave the system.
It goes with that whole Marxist thing.
Right.
It's like the resentment is what powers, the Marxism.
Correct.
So just keeping that resentment going. So it's not really solving any issues. So we're not really building any schools or doing anything that actually solves the problems that are actually happening within the Black community. Chief among them, the fact that Black kids are graduating not knowing how to read and write. So they're literally being set up for failure. But nobody wants to address that situation and actually do anything practical to solve it. But we want to teach critical race theory, which is just this pie in the sky thing that really doesn't go to the heart of anything of any of these issues.
Exactly. So you and I were talking about critical race theory, and we started calling it the Black Demoralization Project. Mm-hmm. So it will demoralize you. It'll tell you that no matter what you do, you can't overcome, that the larger system is all set up against you. And then tell you, once it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you don't become anything, that we have this huge wealth gap, then you just already have an excuse as to why you're not a winner. Mm-hmm. So if you start talking about solutions, That's the way that we test whether or not people really believe in white supremacy. You start presenting them with solutions and they start running away. It's like school choice is kryptonite to critical race theory. Mm-hmm. So when I start proposing, well, why don't we build our own schools? In 1837, the first HBCU, historically black college or university, was founded. 30 years before slavery ended, we were founding the first black college. Mm-hmm. So why don't we have a movement where we have HBCUs K through 12? No, that's when you hear crickets.
No, because the white liberals, well, just liberals in general, now it's black and white, they benefit from the public school system. So they allow you within the critical race theory framework to talk about all these injustices, but just don't touch our school system that benefits us, where millions and billions of dollars are being made for union bosses and all these things. But then they are very much opposed to school choice because they don't want to give black mothers the choice to take their kids to a school where they can graduate knowing how to read and write.
Right, but the same advocates of critical race theory, they want to sit there and say, no, we need to demoralize little black children and little white children, mm-hmm. and so we can get revenge instead of building. So challenge them to build. That's mm-hmm. the first thing you should do if you want to win that conversation.
And that was kind of the sense I also got from the panel, is that there was a lot of like revenge, because at one point they talked about how this is affecting white children, because white children are being told that they're evil, they're racist, their ancestors are genocidal, and all these things. Can you imagine the psychological effect on a child? And just the responses that I saw on that really grieved my spirit, because it was like, oh, I don't care if this white kid feels like this or whatever. So you're going to put the weight of the world on a child.
Right.
And because they're white, you don't care. But isn't that the very thing that you are against, is that racism of looking at somebody else like they're not human? So to me, it's like, people are becoming exactly what they are purporting to fight. And it's so wrong, because when I see a child, I don't care what color they are. They're just this beautiful, innocent, sweet little thing. And for me to think that, oh, I'm okay with that child being hurt because of the color of their skin, it's just wrong. And it's against Martin Luther King. And that leads me to what, one of the panelists said, that Martin Luther King, that I took Martin Luther King's statement out of context, because they said that Martin Luther King was saying it was just a dream. And it was a dream, yes, but he was dreaming of a time when people would look at people based on the content of their character. So if you're not looking at white people based on the content of their character, you're going against Martin Luther King. If you're not looking at Asian people based on the content of their character, you're going against Martin Luther King. If you're not looking at Indian people and so forth. So it doesn't matter what color the person is. It is about you looking at that person as a human being and as an individual.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So one of the last things that I wanted to touch on, there was a gentleman on there, and he it got a little heated, a little bit. I mean, it was very civil for the most part. It was. And obviously, I know tensions flare, and this topic makes some people very, very emotional. But one of the gentlemen on there, he kind of made a dig at me and said that, okay, well, here's this person who came in from Africa and was able to squeak through the white supremacy and become successful, and now she doesn't care about everybody else. So my response to that is that, okay, let's just say white supremacy exists and all that you're saying is true. And I was able to squeak under the radar and actually make it. So why not have a teaching curriculum for children that says, let's reverse engineer what Melissa did,
right,
to become successful in the United States. Let's reverse engineer the way Melissa Tate was able to overcome white supremacy, because this is what was happening in the Black community post-slavery. They were overcoming real white supremacist systems, and we're still thriving, and we're still succeeding and building businesses and building systems and schools and so forth. So my question is, why are we teaching critical race theory that comes out of Germany, that comes out of white European Germany? Since you're against white supremacy, why would you take an ideology that is from Europe to teach children instead of teaching them the values that would actually make them successful? Let's find out how Melissa was able to escape white supremacy and make something of herself. Did she go to school? Did she go to college? Did she work hard? Did she build a business? Did she get married? Do we ever talk about how marriage actually cuts poverty by what percent? You told me about
98%.
98%.
98% of poverty can be attributed to three factors. One of them is having children before you're married. The other one is not getting a high school diploma. And the other one is just not having a job. So if you can do these three things, you have a 98% chance of being in the middle class in America.